Welcome back. So, which energy source is best? Of all of those we kind of discussed, oil, natural gas, nuclear, which one of those is best? We'll take some time in later sections to really dive into each of those, but this is just kind of just a very surface, facts, figures, numbers type section for this first section, last video and this video. So again, which is best? Well, the best energy source depends on the purpose for which it needs to be used. For instance, for your car, it's probably not best to try and shove coal into your car. Coal as an energy source it's very big. You have to burn it. It's very dirty. It's very smelly. It's probably not best to try and use that to be mobile. Whereas gasoline, as we derive from oil, can be stored very easily. It flows. It's very compact. It has a lot of energy for what it's needed. So that's typically the best source for most vehicles. Now that we're getting into electric cars and electricity, maybe that might be the best energy source. So what we need to do in order to figure out which energy source is best is to determine the energy efficiency by calculating something called the energy return on energy investment, EROEI. How much energy do we get out of it versus how much energy do we have to put into it? So it's calculated by some division. So you take the energy you obtain from that particular fuel divided by the energy invested to obtain that particular fuel. And then the larger that number that you come up with after that division, the larger the EROEI, the more efficient the fuel, the better the fuel is. So when we're talking about efficiency, there's a lot of things to think about. For instance, coal, all right? Coal. Look how much energy you have to put into extract and to use coal, in this case, to generate electricity. So coal is found underground. So you have to extract it. That takes energy. You have to transport it. That takes energy. You have to process it. That takes energy. You have to burn it to generate electricity. That takes energy. You have to dispose of the waste. That takes energy. You have to transmit that electricity. That takes energy before it finally gets to you. So there's all these steps, all right? So is all the energy we get out of it, do we get enough to where all of this we put into it, it makes it efficient? Do we get more out of it than what we put into it? All along that track as well, we lose energy, typically in the form of heat. So no energy is really 100% efficient. There's always some energy lost, as typically as heat, as a form of energy. Heat radiating out into the atmosphere. So not only do we use energy in processing, for instance, coal, but we're also losing energy as well. So adding all that up, do we still get more energy to the end user than what we put in or what we lose? And that's where we calculate the EROEI. So again, the energy obtained from that fuel divided by the energy invested to obtain that fuel. So, for example, in order to obtain 100 joules of energy, joule is one of the many units of energy. So this is just an example. So in order to obtain 100 joules of energy, the following is about how much energy needs to be invested in each of the following energy sources. So to get 100 joules out of, let's say, of energy out of a hydroelectric power plant, we need to invest 1.25 joules. So that's average. You have to build a dam to create a hydroelectric power plant. But after that, you just maintain it. You have to pay the workers. But in general, when we'll get into this in a later section and describe how hydroelectricity works, but in general, it's just the water doing its thing, generating electricity. So you only need, on average, to invest 1.25 joules of energy to get out 100 joules of energy. So for hydroelectric energy generation. Surface coal, you have to invest 5 joules of energy to get out 100 joules of it. So all of that, what we looked on the previous slide, the transportation, the processing, the loss, all of that. So that equates to about 5 joules of energy, but out of that coal, we get 100 joules. Subsurface coal, so not all coal is mined at or near the surface. Sometimes it's also mined below ground. That's a little bit more energy intensive, more machinery, more processing. So that takes 10 joules of energy, but we still get out 100 joules of it. And then ethanol. Ethanol is a form of gasoline, essentially, that we derive from plants. So we can actually take plants, often corn, process that to create something called ethanol. And ethanol is added into gasoline, most gasoline. If you look at a gasoline pump, it'll tell you about how much ethanol is in the gasoline. So instead of using oil to derive gasoline, we can do it from plants. But you can see how much energy is invested. 78 joules of energy, and we're only getting 100 joules out. So we're still profiting, but at what expense? At what EROEI? So if we take the total amount of energy obtained from the fuel, in this case 100 joules of energy, divided by how much energy was invested to obtain that fuel, again, the higher number the better, the hydroelectricity comes with an EROEI of 80, surface coal mining 20, subsurface coal mining 10, ethanol a lonely 1.3. So again, the higher number, the better. So even though to generate hydroelectricity, we need to create a dam up a river that can destroy environments, flood areas. So it can do a number of bad things, but as far as energy invested versus what we get out of it, it's very efficient. And these are just a few examples. So it's something we need to think about. What's the best energy to use for what we need it for, and how can we be efficient with that and get the most out of it. So speaking of efficiency, focusing on transportation. So this is the amount of energy expended for different modes of transportation in the United States. So how many megajoules of energy per passenger kilometer? So if we were to take one person 1 kilometer, which is about 0.7 miles, how much megajoules of energy goes into something like that? So air travel takes 2.1 joules of energy, megajoules of energy. Passenger car 3.6, motorcycle, trains 1.1, and bus 1.7. So the higher the number, the more energy you use to take someone a kilometer. The lower the number, in this case, the less energy you use to take that same person 1 kilometer. So motorcycles and trains, at least on this list, are the most efficient way of getting around. Now, there's other environmental concerns that go along with each of these. This is just purely the amount of energy. So motorcycles and trains are very efficient. Buses, right, also very efficient. Airplanes, somewhat efficient. Cars are the worst, right? Cars are the worst. That's what we have the most of, and they are the least efficient. They're heavy, they're big, they take a lot of fuel. They're the least efficient mode of transportation. Again, looking at efficiency in transportation. So this looks from 1975 to 2020. This looks at average fuel economy. So how many miles per gallon are we getting? So you can see from 75 to 87, the efficiency of vehicles, miles per gallon, went on average from about 13 miles per gallon up to about 22 miles per gallon. So that's a good jump. Why? There was an oil crisis. Oil got expensive. So cars became more fuel efficient, so they used less fuel to kind of offset those higher rising gas prices. And then from 1988 to 2004, you see a drop in efficiency by 12%. It went from 22 miles per gallon on average down to about 19 miles per gallon. Why is that? Well, gas became cheap. So car companies started making bigger vehicles. SUVs and big trucks became very popular in the late 80s, up till the 2004s. And then in 2005 to currently, thankfully, the efficiency of vehicles is rising again. To now it's somewhere around 26 miles per gallon. Just because of different laws enacted, the just admitting that climate change is a thing finally. So companies wanting to do the right thing. We still have a long way to go, but cars have increased in efficiency by 29%. Now that gas prices are going up again, that might even jump even higher. Cars to be more fuel efficient, because if gas is more expensive, then people are going to want to buy cars that use less of it. Therefore, car companies will kind of adjust themselves. Which, by the way, the gas prices has nothing to do with who's in office, president, Senate, Congress, whatever. It's driven by the free market, which unfortunately we are beholden to. You think about, for instance, oil companies. They lost a lot of money last year due to COVID. You think they're just going to deal with that? No, they want that money back. So guess what they're doing? They're charging higher prices for oil, which means higher prices at the Gulf or at the gas pump. It's economics. It's a simple answer why. All this garbage about politics and why isn't this person doing more about it? Because they can't. That's just how the market works. Hey, you wanted to live in this democracy, deal with it. So again, but that drop, again, gas prices, there was a lot of oil, gas prices became really cheap, efficiency of cars went down because people were like, I can buy the bigger car. I don't care about gas anymore. Which is not a wise thing. All right, so let's pause there. That was a lot of information, some facts and figures just thrown your way. What we're going to talk about in the next section is fossil fuels, how they form, and how we use them. So fossil fuels being things like oil, natural gas, coal. And then we'll talk about alternative energy sources, wind, solar, nuclear, etc. So in the next few sections, we'll kind of break it all down, talk about all those different things, what they are, how they formed. Again, this first section, just a lot of numbers and facts thrown your way, just so you can understand kind of where we're at in our society, how we use these things, what we use, etc. So again, we'll pause here. We'll come back. We'll talk about fossil fuels and how they form. So this is getting into the geology of it. See you back here in just a second.